Hello, all the nerds out there. I hope you all are doing fine. And today, guess what we are going to discuss, and it's our great Homer. So, I hope all of you are ready and pretty excited about Homer's life and his two great epic Iliad and Odyssey. So we are going to talk about today Homer's everything about it. We'll also talk about summary. We talk about why it's important and all other things. So you guys are ready? Then write in the comment or chat box that ready. So anyway, so what in the ancient world, especially in Greek ancient Greece, Homer was like the big short poem at that time. And he's the one we give credit for writing two great epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. But here's the thing, we don't really know about, much about this guy. And scholars think he was born around 750 BC and lived in or near Chios. And but get this, seven different cities claim to be his birthplace. So talk about confusion, here it is. So let's see his uncertain biography. So since we are clueless about Homer's life, a lot of experts think his poems are the best way to get a glimpse into who he was. And they even say he was blind because he talks about a blind bard in the Odyssey. And in that same epic, he's like shown as a minstrel who goes around performing for local rulers. So that's something interesting, right? So now here's a crazy idea. Some folks thinks that the Iliad and the Odyssey might have been written by different people, like centuries apart. And the language and style of the two poems are pretty different. The Iliad has this kind of fancy, dramatic vibe, while the Odyssey takes more everyday storytelling approach. So there are also historical details about trade that suggest different authors. And that twist is not enough. Here's another twist, that neither of these poems was written down right. And after they were actually created, back in the 18th century BC, Greece wasn't big on writing things down right. So the Iliad and the Odyssey were actually passed down orally, people telling the story to each other. And get this, the name Homer might have just been a general term for blind dudes who went around reciting epic poetry in the countryside. So, as for other works attributed to Homer, like the Homeric hymns, we can't say for sure if he really written them or not. So, they are probably lost to the sands of time. So, that was all about his uncertain biography. Let's move to his great epic, that is Iliad. And here there is also a summary in in this slide you can see over here, and also a little bit introduction. And I have tried to make it all this summary in the slide itself, so you can just look over it. But by the way, let's start. So Iliad, so as we know, Homer, and he is supposedly the one who wrote the Iliad, but we are not sure, right? But of course it's by Homer. So this ancient epic poem is like a super old, dating back to 8th century BC. It's actually one of the oldest works of Western literature, along with the Odyssey, which is all about Odysseus and his crazy adventure after the stuff that went down in the Iliad. And it right now we are talking about Iliad. So here's the summary for you. And the Iliad tells the story of the Trojan War, where a bunch of Greek states got together and laid siege to Troy for 10 freaking years. And it's all about the battle and drama during this short period of time when Agamemnon and Achilles couldn't stop arguing like a bunch of divas, right? So here's the deal. Agamemnon, as we know, is the kind of villain, right? So gets his hands on this girl named Chryseis and won't let her go, even though her dad is begging for her to release. Bad move, right? So Chryseis' dad is like, fine, I'll call in Apollo. And guess what? Apollo is not happy. He starts attacking the Greeks left and right, causing chaos. So the Greek leaders, led by Achilles, are like, okay, Agamemnon, let the girl go. So he finally does, but he's not done being a jerk, right? He takes Achilles' girl, Briseis, and just to get back at him. Well, that seriously ticks off Achilles, and he's like, I'm done fighting, man. And he even gets his mom, Thetis, to pray to Zeus to help the Trojans. So Zeus, again, who's been playing it cool, until now, decides to lend a hand to the Trojans. And so the Greeks and Trojans keep going at it. And with the gods throwing in there, so all the helps. And here's where it gets into Hector, and the Trojan hero gets a power boost from Apollo. So after Aias throws a freaking huge rock at him, he becomes super fast and strong, leading the Trojan to push the Greeks a little bit back. Just when it seems like the Greeks are screwed, Achilles' best buddy, who as we know him, Patroclus, right? Patroclus, and is like, dude, get back in the fight. But Achilles is saying, nah, I'm not feeling it. I'm not gonna fight again. So Patroclus decides to borrow Achilles' armor and goes back to fight. So things are looking good for the Greeks, but then he runs into Hector and things really go south. And Hector kills Patroclus and takes his armor. This seriously pisses off who? Our hero Achilles, and who swears to avenge his friend. So Hephaestus, these crazy weird name of these Greek gods, of course. So this Hephaestus, the Greek god of blacksmith, hooks him up with some sick new armor, and Achilles jumps back to for the fight, and the Greeks start kicking Trojan and push them all the way back to Troy. So it all culminates in a final showdown between Achilles and Hector. Spoiler alert, guys, Achilles ends up killing Hector, but not before Hector gets a shot at Achilles' one weak spot, which was his heel, right? And yeah, his mom dipped him in some river but forgot to cover his heel, and that's his downfall. So the Greeks are like, again, how can we get into Troy? And Odysseus, the clever dude, comes up with the genius plan. They build a giant wooden horse, and you know what happened? They put some sneaky soldiers into it, and the rest of the Greek army pretends to leave in their ship. So the Trojans are like, haha, we finally won it. Look at this fancy horse. They also left us this gift. So they bring the horse into the city and have a wild celebration. But little do they know, the Greeks are actually still there. When night falls, Odysseus and his boys pop up out of the horse and take out guards and open the gates. They unleash chaos on Trojans, and the Greeks finally claim victory. And that's how the Greeks pulled off the ultimate Trojan horse prank and won the war. So talk about a wild and epic tale. Here it is, guys. So that was all about Iliad, right? Now let's move to the Odyssey. And what happens there? I know Iliad is quite interesting, right? And you are actually aware of this story through the movies. We have Troy, one movie in Netflix, and there are so many related to that Iliad. And in Odyssey, and what happens in Odyssey is quite different, right? As we have learned in the beginning of the lecture, that the writing style is different. As we know, it was just passed down through the generations, right? So obviously there will be some difference in the style, but remember that this is all by Homer, right? So Homer wrote, as we know, is two major epic poems in ancient Greece, and it is the Odyssey and the Iliad, right? And this masterpiece of literature is one of the earliest extant work still widely read today. And similarly to Iliad, the poem, again, this Odyssey consists of 24 books, and the story depicts the return of Greek hero Odyssey to Ithaca after fighting in the Trojan War. I think you remember also Tennyson's poem and the Ulysses. So it is, the story is kind of, you are familiar of it. So now let's get back to the Odyssey. So Odysseus, it actually here, it took him like 10 more years after the war to complete his journey, during which he met many perils and all his crew members were killed. So Odysseus was presumed dead in his absence, and there is his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus had to deal with a group of boisterous suitors and who were competing for Penelope's hand. And it's like 12,000 lines long and covers all kinds of crazy stuff from Greek history, myth, and legends. So Here we are talking about encounters with man-eating giants, a sorceress who turns dude into pigs. Can you imagine that? And a long lost king reclaiming his throne. So it's kind of wild ride, and I hope you all are ready. So here's the mind-blowing part of the poem, that this poem was composed way before the Greeks even had their alphabet, like back in the 8th century BC. So people couldn't read it back then. It was meant to be performed. There were these dudes called rhapsodes, and these rhapsode who were like oral poets. They'd recite the poem to an audience and keep them hooked. So now we're not even sure if this Homer guy, who's supposedly, the author, is actually real or just a legend. So the earliest mention of him like came centuries after his supposed time. And get this, the poem we have today has gone through so many changes, right? And revisions by different authors. So it's been stitched together from existing stories, jokes, myths, and songs. So imagine patching up a quilt made of ancient tale. And to perform this epic life, the rhapsodies, the guys who recite all these poems, right, had to keep things steady, and they had a meter going on and used mnemonic devices to help them remember the next part. So it's like having a catchy chorus in a song. So they throw in description of scenes and lists of the characters to keep things flowing. So it's like a mental roadmap for them. So since the stories were already known to the audience, they'd hear different parts of the poem out of order. At some point, the order got fixed, and that's what we have now. So since the world has changed a lot since then, it's good to have a little background before diving in, right? So the Odyssey is actually a sequel to Homer's other famous epic, that is the Iliad, right, which tells the story of Trojan War. And let me tell you, the one big lesson from both poems is to never ever take off the gods, right? All the things, again, all the tragedy in our Greek tragedy has happened because of that we somehow disrespected the gods and their oracle and their fate, and then all the catastrophic chaos happens, right? So this is the lesson, that at that time you should never, piss off the gods. So these divine beings are kind of mix of powers and insecurity, and they hold grudges like nobody's business, and messing with them leads to a major problem. So the Greeks had this whole thing called xenia, and which they welcomed strangers into their homes with open arms, fearing they might be gods in disguise. So it was all about hospitality, with hosts providing safety, food, and comfort, and all these guests showing courtesy and maybe even bringing gifts. So it's a big deal in Odyssey also. So whereas this Odysseus is this perpetual guest on his crazy adventure, while his clever wife Penelope holds things down back at home. So the Odyssey takes us through all of Odysseus' journey and all his years of travel, but the story, it starts in the middle of the things. 10 years after the Trojan War, our hero is stuck on an island, nowhere near his homeland of Ithaca, and his family he hasn't seen for like 2 decades. See, he really ticked off Poseidon, the sea god, right? And by blinding his Cyclops son, so getting home has been like one mishaps after another. So with trouble brewing at home and the gods discussing his fate, Odysseus starts telling his host about all the crazy stuff that happened during those missing years. And trust me, it's like a mind-blowing adventure. So what's fascinating is that we know so little about the actual period of the Odyssey. But the poem itself is packed with detail. So historians and archaeologists have been on like a century-long quest to find the ruins of Troy, figure out which island Odysseus visited. So the journey of this 24-book epic has been a tale in itself. So guys, buckle up, now we are moving to the summary. So the Odyssey is like, it's gonna take us on one wild ride through ancient Greek myths and legend. So it's kind of blockbuster movie. Then also Netflix special is coming in your screen. So let's dive and uncover the secrets of this epic adventure. So okay, I'll just make it very brief. So here's the deal. The Odyssey, as we know, it's not your kind of typical linear story. It's like a puzzle where you piece things together as you go. So in the middle of the tale, we finally starts getting the scoop on what happened earlier through Odysseus' own story. So in the first book, we meet Odysseus' family back in Ithaca. His wife Penelope and his son Telemachus are dealing with a bunch of obnoxious suitors who thinks they can waltz in and take Odysseus' place after the whole Trojan War thing, right? And Telemachus, being the badass that he is, decides to find out what happened to his old man. And he embarks on a secret journey and ends up meeting Nestor and Menelaus, two dudes who fought alongside Odysseus at Troy. And guess what? They spill the beans that Odysseus is still alive and he's still kicking. So now Odysseus himself takes the stage in the next few books. He's been stuck on this island called Ogygia. I don't know how to say. Anyway, held captive by a smoking hot sorceress named Calypso. But finally he managed to break free and washes up on the shores of Syria, and there the Phaeacians, I guess, live. And let me tell you, he's got one heck of a story to share. So he kind of spills all the crazy details about his journey back home, including run-ins with lotus eaters that we know from Tennyson's poem, right? The Lotus Eater. And also we know what is about Odysseus in his Ulysses. So these all kind of getting mixed up with the sorceress Circe and facing man-eating giants called Lytrogonians, and narrowly escaping from the one-eyed monster Cyclops or Polyphemus. And let's not forget the heart-pounding adventure of sailing between Scylla and Charybdis, and the epic shipwreck that leaves Odysseus stranded alone on Ogygia. So anyway, so that's a summary in brief, and we have talked about Homer now, and that's also the end of this session. So nerds, don't forget to subscribe. Do subscribe and also like the video and leave some comments if you have. And if you want me to make some other videos, you can also mention that there. So anyway, thank you so much. Bye bye, and I'll see you in a next video, which will be about Greek poet Hesiod. So I'll see you there. Bye bye, and have a great day ahead.